That's taught me that I should keep at my Jado Jehad for making it to Broadway, and I want every one of you to keep at your Jado Jehad in whatever area of life that you want to fight for acceptance. And if we never give up, one day there will be a just world for all.
Yeah, Preeti.
Yes, obviously, like, not a huge turnout, but it's okay. We're a very grassroots organization. We just started a couple weeks ago. So I think we're just grateful to be, like, having conversations like this, and honestly, like, to be able to commune with you guys it's more than we can ask for. So very grateful regardless of turnout and all that stuff. But I guess I can just start by introducing like what we do as Kala Sangha, and because just to give you guys a little bit more insight, because we are hosting you. So Kala Sangha is something that Shishmita and I started at the HEC this semester. So this is the Howard Thurman Center. And it's essentially like a program and organization here at Boston University that tries to embody Howard Thurman, who was this like mystic, activist leader during like the civil rights movement and like 60s, 70s. And his ethos was essentially to create common ground. He believed that if we were able to bridge our gaps and bridge any sort of prejudice that we had amongst each other, that we could commune and find peace in that way. A lot of big civil rights leaders like MLK, and he even went to India and talked to Gandhi. They followed his ethos and read his meditations. So that's what this space is founded upon. And Kala Sangha lives under this space, so we try to also follow that ethos. And specifically, we try to unite South Asians through creativity, mindfulness, and culture. Those are our 3 pillars. And we believe that this show very much so embodies those 3 pillars. So that's a little bit about Kala Sangha. It's a little baby right now. But yes, a lot of our members also came to the show and enjoyed it very much. So yes. And for reference, my name is Gari, and I'm sure you all know that by now. But yes, I guess we can begin by just introducing ourselves to everyone here. Would you like to begin?
I'm Preeti.
I'm Fatima.
I'm Vidisha, she, her.
I'm Jyoti, she, her. I'm Sushmita, she, her.
And Fatima, could you introduce the play a little bit? And then we can get a little bit more into what everyone's role was in the play, and then we can talk a little about the experience in of itself. Yeah.
Absolutely. Jado Jehad is my playwriting MFA thesis. It is a play that follows the journey of 3 women, a mother, a daughter, and a grandmother, who find themselves in each other's company after a very long time, and have to work through a number of personal, intergenerational issues to reconcile their differences. This is a play that I've been working on for 1.5 years now. The idea of Jado Jehad, or the title, I think is important to introduce because it means the idea of Jado Jehad is to strive or to struggle. It's rooted in the idea of continuity, not just struggle, but continued struggle. And choosing this title was important because not only did it represent what I was attempting to do at the point, but also what the characters are doing in an attempt to forge their way towards each other. And so to this end, this cast has been absolutely integral to the development of the script. We had auditions last fall, after which we had a workshop in November, where I brought itsy bitsies, almost puzzle pieces to the table, and we read them together week 1, and then in the time that I had between them, I wrote a whole lot of other stuff, went back to the table with them, and then we read it all together, and then we just kind of put it together and read it again in a structure that made more sense to me at the time. And then I spent December sort of rewriting it, and we had rehearsals. We had a very short rehearsal period, which is almost 3.5-ish weeks before we had tech, which is just all you hand it over to the designers then to do all of their lighting and music and costumes, and then 2 weekends of shows.
Yes. That just ended last weekend.
That just ended last weekend, yes. We are all very sad now.
Post-show recovery.
Yes, absolutely.
For sure.
Okay, so instead of like just talking about a synopsis of the show, I think it would be really cool if every single character kind of talked about their own journey of what they were going through in the show itself. So with Vidisha, would you want to begin?
Sure. Hi, I'm Vidisha. I played Mushal, who is this 24-year-old woman who has just returned to Pakistan after studying in the U.S., doing a biochemistry degree and doing 1 year of work because her father left her mother for a side hoe. I'm like going to the script. I'm like, my father impregnated his side hoe, and then decided to divorce my mom and start a whole new life. And yeah, she's just struggling with not only her cultural identity, but also her sexual orientation and how all of that fits together, not only in Pakistan, but in her new family structure, because she is now living with her grandmother that I don't think she has lived with before. Yeah, and it was a big process because this is a character who I've never felt so close to, because there were a lot of shared experiences there. And yeah, I'm gonna pass it on to Jyoti.
So I played Manzoor, who is the grandmother, and basically my character has fairly recently become widowed. She was married for 60 years, or was with her husband for 60 years, and he's been dead for 4. And she's kind of a mystical character in that she is in contact with her husband. And she has a monologue where she talks about being able to feel when he's unhappy, or he's constipated, or he has diarrhea, or stomachache. And so she's still very much in relationship with him. And she's finding it very difficult to be of this world and also connected to that world and kind of navigate that. And she sort of describes a spiritual awakening that she has, where she feels very connected to Allah, who's now she can speak to directly, and he'll take care of her husband. So it's actually I think one of the most beautiful parts of the play. Fatima is a poet in so many ways. Her plays are so beautiful, but this monologue was a gem and just so fun to do. And it tells you a lot about this kind of more complexity to the grandmother than you might imagine. So my struggle as an actor was, I had a nanny and my mother. So my mother was a nanny to my 2 daughters, and I had a very formal grandmother, my mother's mother. And so my mother was born in Pakistan, but her family was Sikh, and so they had to leave during the partition. And so there's a lot of trauma in my family, and my grandmother was very tough. And my mother subsequently became quite tough in her old age. So when I was thinking about this part, I didn't want to be so tough and hard on my daughter and my granddaughter. So that was my challenge as an actor, to make her still, that you liked her and you felt for her and you could understand why she sometimes retreated to her old-fashioned ideas, because she knew them and she understood them and the world made sense to her in that way. But she's also able, obviously, to change by the end of the play and adopt, I think, a very modern reality, which is that she accepts her daughter and her daughter's partner. And so anyway, that was her arc. She starts off quite traditional, and then she realizes she will lose her granddaughter, and so she has to change. I think her relationship with her daughter is complicated. She's pretty mean to her daughter. And I think she has a little less patience with Karima than she does with her granddaughter. But they do also kind of heal their relationship by the end of the play, it feels like to me. And what else do I want to say? It was a delight to do. I love doing comedy. And I feel like Manzoor had some of the best singers.
For sure. For
I'm
sure.
very lucky to do that. So I grew up, I'm half Indian and half French. My father was from France. And so for me it was a particular joy, because I don't get to hang out with Indian actors and playwrights and, folks from that part of the world as much as I would like to. My mother has passed away, so in some ways my connection to India has become even, less real or less substantial. So this was just a gift. I do feel sad that my mother didn't see the show. I think she would have loved it. But it was just a joy. So I'm so grateful to have been part of it.
Preeti, would you?
I'm gonna pass it on.
Pass to Preeti first.
Pass it to Preeti.
So I played Karima. Just by a show of hands, how many of you came to see Jado Jehad? Oh, thank you. So I read the play in May. Thank you. In May of last year. That's when the equity principal audition notice had come out in the members portal, AEA members portal, Actors Equity Association. So I reached out to the then artistic director and I requested a copy of the script that I wanted to prepare for the audition. And she sent me one. So I read the script and needless to add, I loved Karima at the get-go. But what pulled me to the script even more was that it talks about the fight for acceptance, the universal need for acceptance. I think the in some shape or form, we are all looking for acceptance, be it with, that's ingrained in us. It's like be it with family or friends, or rather people you want to be friends with, society, relatives, in-laws, co-workers. So in Karima's case, for instance, she is fighting for acceptance from her mother as well as from her daughter. And in my case too, when I go about auditioning for Broadway shows, I am fighting for acceptance to be accepted into the Great White Way. That is my Jado Jehad. So that's how I think my and Karima's character I was able to relate with her in that sense.
Wow. Yes.
Well, hello. I was Amal. I was a supporting character, and I think then we had a guest speaker on Affinity Night, Sabaka Zakaria, and she said this sentence, I think, where she talked about how queer people in Pakistan, or just kids in Pakistan in general, also in India, kind of lead these double lives. And I think Amal's character was the vehicle into showing that. And I don't know what else to say. But yeah, she's very fun and hot and cute. And I learned a few things.
It's my fault. I gave Sush a very one-dimensional character. She did great though.
Yeah, but what I can talk about what pulled me to the script more so was last year. There was this posting on SASA, the South Asian Student Association at BU, just looking for South Asian actors or people in general just to read the script. And I at the time, this was my first time ever taking a script writing class for screenwriting for film. And I was like, okay, my story that I want to tell is very similar to just Fatima's life in general. And so that's I just learned. I just read your script and I was like, this is writing. I will learn from this. And now I've stayed learning.
Sush has been the oldest little one on the script.
Yes.
It's been almost, what was that?
It's like a year.
It's been a
March,
year,
yeah.
It's been a year since I've been working on the script with Sush and Jyoti, and these two came in after the summer. Yes.
Okay. I think there's such a common theme when you all talk about what pulls you to the script and this personal life experience and how you felt like very, very personally connected and attached to these characters. But Fatima, when you were writing this, what life experiences, if you'd like to share, were you drawing upon when you were writing the script, and what really made it even more meaningful, like the opportunity that you had to tell this story, and why did it feel so important, and what necessarily attached you to it?
I think for me, this story was obviously very not inspired, but influenced by the time that I spent in Pakistan in between college and grad school. I had 3 years where I had to go back and, where I was a completely new person, where I learned all these different ways of life, of existing, of, being, even, I went back home and my standard breakfast was Greek yogurt and granola. I was that bougie thing. But, just everything from the smallest of things to the biggest of things were in conflict all of a sudden with what my mother wanted, with what society expected of me, with what my father wanted me to end up doing. And so I I fled, honestly. I just applied to grad school because I had to. I even picked playwriting because I had to. So I was like, if there's one thing that I've really done in theater, it's write plays. So I should just, do an MFA in playwriting. And I applied for 3 years in a row until I got in, and I was like, thank fuck, let's get out. Did not process any of those years until I got here and started really writing plays on the regular, which I had never done before. In my undergrad, I did a decent amount of, I did 2 years of theater alongside a degree in economics, but not a whole lot of exposure. And before that, of course, growing up in Pakistan, I had not had much exposure to theater at all. So then it was full-time playwriting, and of course, for the first time, I had to really sit down and think about what do I want to write about. When you're applying to grad school, of course, you want it to be larger than life. You want it to be all these stories that make a difference, and of course, that is important. But I think what became more important, as I continued this Jado Jehad on writing my thesis, what I realized was that I just needed to write the play that I needed to write, which at that time, in point when I, also had started therapy very seriously, was just, process a lot that had happened during my time in Pakistan, and as a means to also reflect on my relationship with my mother and the country and everything else that it entails. And so, I really tried writing a different play also. This play, I feel like I've written 2-3 different plays in the process of writing this play. But I think what I kept going back to again and again was just those relationships that I needed to work on, was those experiences that I needed to think through and process and see how they had impacted who I had become and who I had started out as. I think, more than anything else, I just needed to live through a lot of that and understand how it had impacted me. And so at that point in time, that meant writing a play about it. And so I stopped trying to do things that other people were trying to push me towards and just, finished what I had started. And that ended up taking a second, but here we are.
So I guess my next question is, what is it specifically about the medium of theater and script writing or playwriting that kind of you saw as the way that you wanted to channel your stories? And then moving on to even just acting, how did you guys get into acting, and why have you chosen that as a path to walk upon? But yes.
I think theater in particular, I picked it up in college, of course. And before that, as a kid, I used to write a lot, as a self-titled weirdo. And just generally, of course, when you're in the closet as a kid, you're just a bit fucking weird, We've all been there. So as a kid, I obviously knew that there was something wrong with me, but I didn't know how to process or feel. Of course, so much of this vocabulary is not something that we use on a day-to-day basis. And so writing was an out in some sense. And but I was also, the oldest in my family, and so both my parents are doctors. So there were some certain set expectations that they had from me. And so I had to let go of writing at some point to just, focus on becoming a doctor and whatnot. And it wasn't until I got to college that I got back into it. And, it's at that, and it was a particular point in my life where I needed perhaps a cathartic thing, or, something that I could do in my life that, made me feel things. Of course, economics was not it. And so I started doing theater, very gradually and slowly, and, became more and more serious about it. Up until my final semester, I was still planning to do a thesis in economics. And then at some point, I was just like, who am I kidding? I hate this. So then I just decided to do a thesis in theater, and then went back home and continued doing theater. And I think at that point, the motivation was very much to write stories that make a difference, But that is something that has evolved and changed over time. But yes, that is the long and short of it.
Yes. And then who would like to go first?
Vidisha.
Why? You can. Okay. I always wanted to get into acting, but it was one of those things that was in my international school in Singapore very dominated by the white kids who were very, encouraged by their parents. And my parents were very supportive and encouraging. When it came to the arts that they deemed culturally acceptable, which was Indian classical dance, which I did for 8 years, and then they were cool and they were like, hey, do figure skating, and I was like, okay, at 9 years old. And so then I did that for like 10 years, and I just always wanted to get into theater, and I just didn't have any entryway into it. And so when it came to college, I joined a theater company, thought I couldn't act for shit, and then I made some friends who were supportive and kind, and they just gave me the patience and understanding that I needed of doing something new that is inherently very vulnerable. And they worked through my monologues with me, and then I got cast in a couple productions at school, and then I got the email for this production, and I was like, okay, I'm not gonna get it. I'm just gonna apply on a whim. I made my theater resume in like an hour, and I sent it through. Fuck you. Yeah, and then I sent it through, and then I had the audition, and I thought it went terrible, and then I got it, and I was like, oh my god, this is amazing, because what a wonderful way to start, to have a professional acting debut, is to tell a story that means so much to me, and now I can see to so many other people who've talked to me, who've either been friends or people who come to see the play, who've talked to me afterwards, or have messaged me, or strangers who come to see the play and message me afterwards. So, yeah, Fatima, you wrote a really, really cool piece of art. We're friends, by the way, so that's why we're rude to each other.
Preeti, how did you get into
Yeah.
acting?
Yes.
Please,
Oh,
we want your
yes.
story.
I would rather Judy went first.
Well, I started acting as a very young child. I grew up here right around the corner, and I found out somehow about the Boston Children's Theater, which was an amazing, magical place in downtown Boston. So I used to take the subway when I was 10 years old after school and go down to Copley Square and one of these old, beautiful brownstones and go into the magical Boston Children's Theater, and we took all kinds of classes, and I auditioned for Zoom. If any of you know about that show, probably not. That shows you how old I am. But Zoom was this show on WGBH which became incredibly popular across the country, and I didn't get it because I was very shy as a 10-year-old and didn't do very well in the audition, but it was this incredible show where kids, probably 10 to 13 or 14, kind of did all this great stuff, and very creative and cool kind of after-school show, and so I got bitten by the bug very, very young. I wrote my first play, actually, when I was in 4th grade, and we performed
Wow.
it. So I remember doing that, which was very funny. And so I did Boston Children's Theater, and then my family, my father was a professor, and we moved out to Berkeley, California for a year, and there was an amazing director of theater at the public school that I went to in Berkeley, and that really, we got to do all kinds of competitions, and it was just, an amazing experience for me. And I was it's hard to believe, but I was a very shy kid. And so somehow I knew that I wanted to do this, and I couldn't be shy. You can't be shy as an actor, and you can't care about how ridiculous you look on stage. I was talking to Social Mitra about that. So, the thing about acting is you have to be willing to look ugly, you have to be willing to look ridiculous, and you have to let go of your ego, and you have to just subsume yourself into the character. And the thing I see with a lot of young actors is they want to be beautiful and attractive. It's like you're holding yourself in a way that is keeping you from getting into the character. So I knew as a young girl that if I wanted to do this, I had to get over my fear and my insecurity, or it wasn't even insecurity, it was really shyness. So when I got back from Berkeley, I went to Brookline High School, and I did not do theater because it was all the white, cool goth kids. And I was really intimidated by the cool goth kids, and they all smoked pot, which, my family was like, we don't do drugs. immigrant families, as you know, have lots of rules around stuff like that. So, and I was very, very sheltered. My family, you know, you had to be home for dinner, you didn't get to do sleepovers, you know, it was very, very strict. So I got to college and I started doing theater, and I got turned off because so many actors are both so insecure and so vain in the same moment, and I just couldn't handle it. So I was like, these people are trying to be crazy, and it was very competitive, and people were very, you know, stabbing each other in the back, and I just thought, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not my scene. So I became a psychotherapist, and I started working with women with eating disorders. That's my specialty. And I'm a feminist, and I grew up at a time when eating disorders exploded, and I saw it very much as a feminist issue, that we were being told what to look like and what to wear and what to weigh, and so that was my career for many years, and I still am a therapist, but I work with all kinds of things, lots of Southeast Asians, which I'm loving. And so then when I had children, I had 2 daughters, I decided I wanted them to get into theater because it teaches you to speak and project and be hopefully secure. And so they got into theater, I started doing theater with them, and was just very fortunate, started to be able to do professional theater. I eventually moved back to Boston. I was living in Vermont for many years, and was very incredibly lucky to be cast regularly in equity theaters and some movies and TV and stuff. So I'm hoping that I just get to keep doing it. It's a wonderful place to play and meet incredible people and bring stories, right? So all day long I listen to people's stories, and at night I tell stories. That's sort of how I talk about my life.
So my story goes back to my childhood years, not very long ago. So that was when I used to watch Bollywood movies. Mr. Amitabh Bachchan was starring Bollywood movies. So, and then I would dance to Bollywood tunes, pretending to be Mr. Bachchan, and then I would have a fully inflated balloon tied to my hand, which would be my fellow, like the female co-star. So I had no doubt back then what I would do growing up. But as fate would have it, my sister, who used to make my career decisions for me back then, said, you will major in mathematics, you will do a master's in computer science, which too in University of Pune, which was like so far away from home. And she said, so that you can pursue white-collar jobs. So I did exactly that. And even although I have to admit, I kept visiting Mumbai in hopes of getting discovered by Bollywood, if there's such a thing as that. And then fast forward to 2007, and I am in Los Angeles. I got a full-time job at NBC Universal as a senior business analyst. And my entire family was very happy that I'm putting my computer science degree to a good use. In those 4 years of my tenure with NBC Universal, I watched so many Hollywood movies, either through employee screenings or free DVDs, which we used to get through every release, almost every Tuesday, that I was like, okay, this is a sign. I have seen enough. Now I want to be seen. So in 2011, I take my early retirement from my career in IT, and I started going to all open auditions as well as acting classes, living in Los Angeles. 2012 was when I first performed on stage, and now 11 years, 300 auditions, and 31 straight plays later, here I am.
Wow. Goodness. That's so cool. You're so cool. Wow.
Mathematics and computer science?
Yep.
Alright, yeah, me. Well, I did theater productions as a kid, but my school was really, really tiny in Pennsylvania, and yeah, it was tiny. It was weird, right? My class size, I think, was at most 16 kids every year, and the art and music class that we had did a production every year as well. And at the beginning of each, like in September, they just give you what you play. I think the first role that I ever did was for Lion King, and I was Sarabi. And I had no choice. I literally had to do it. I had to be on stage. And as a kid, I apparently had no stage fright, is what my parents and my grandparents have always said about me. But I also grew up dancing, so I was on the stage many a time. And I just loved it, but somewhere in between high school and college, I lost a bit of confidence. I lost my my way on stage because I stopped dancing and I stopped presenting myself in a way that I was proud of. But I took this acting class with Seamus, I think, yeah, just a year ago. Not a year ago, last semester. And I would talk to him after class, before class. A lot of the kids were just kind of taking it to take it. But I really wanted to get to know Seamus and what acting is. And kind of get to the bottom of why I feel like there's a wall between me and the stage. And so I was practicing some script with him, and I just couldn't get the lines out. I couldn't get words out of my mouth. And he looked at me and he was like, "It sounds like you have a bit of a fear of failure." And I was like, "Yeah, no one has ever looked at me and said those words to me, and really made me believe that, yeah, I am afraid of being bad at something. I'm afraid of failing." And I really wanted to get over that. I don't want that going forward in my life and whatever I'm doing. I don't know what I want to do, obviously, film, photography, whatever. But I did want to become better at just presenting myself, feeling secure, going back to what Jyoti says, and acting. So yeah, that's what I'm here.
No.
I guess I want to ask Preeti, have you encountered a lot of South Asian scripts before, or productions that are led by South Asian people?
Excellent question, and I wanted to say no.
Really?
This was the first time, the second time. The previous one was also Fatima's play that I did.
Wow.
When I started my very first play in 2012, I was playing an Indian character, but I would not say that was a South Asian's idea of an Indian character. It's a white person's idea of what they think, how an Indian speaks and such. And that director would tell me, "Okay, this word is too good the way you speak. Can you do it more in the way which he thought Indians would speak?" And I was I used to think, so that was when I started going to auditions, I wasn't even sure whether I will get cast in those white roles, which I was very fortunate enough in getting cast in. So then I got my first role as that, where the director cast me because he thought I had a great accent. And it was so off-putting for me because I used to think, what accent? I'm speaking English, what are you talking about accent? So then when I did, then it was last year we did, when I performed in Fatima's play, that I was very blessed in terms of doing a play which is our story by us. You know what I mean? As opposed to someone else's idea of what our lives are back in India or in Pakistan. You know what it's coming straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Yeah. And would you say the same for you, Jyoti? Have you encountered South Asian productions before?
No, this was the first one, and I also saw an advertisement or something, and I came early in the process last March. So there were some workshops that Fatima was holding, and so I came and just read for her a few times, and I was very excited to see that the play was actually going to get produced. I was hoping that it would be.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's really hard to find, I think, scripts just for people in color in general that are not, your gangster, criminal, or certainly for men. I think there are even less parts for women of color. It's very, very difficult. So, what you have to do is go up for the white role and hope that you get a director who's like, this could work. But what I get most often is, you were fantastic, but I just can't see you in the role. Or, how could I possibly cast you as her sister? And I always think, has Hamilton taught us nothing? But it's definitely changed, I would say, since Black Lives Matter. I do think I'm getting more chances. I'm getting more opportunities than I've ever had. I just don't know how long it's going to last.
Hopefully forever.
Hopefully forever.
Hopefully it gets better.
Yeah, and then people like Fatima have to do it.
Yeah.
So how did acting and being in a production that is written by a South Asian playwright and is a South Asian story help you connect to your own culture? Anyone can go.
I'm gonna jump on that. So this whole process, I've felt a lot of art imitates life. Life imitates art, because I've been going through a lot of just life things where I've related to my character. So for those of you who haven't seen the play, she's very gay. And I am also just a little bit gay. And it is something that, I've struggled with, okay, how do I tell my parents this? Because there's also this whole other discourse about being bisexual and bisexual erasure and how, oh, but if you are also attracted to men, it's fine because you could be passively straight for the rest of your life if you end up marrying a man. And that's true and would be easier for my life if that were the case. But I don't want to live my life in fear, and I don't want to not come out to people just in the off chance I won't ever have to, because I feel like it's a part of me that I don't want to be hiding anymore, and it's a part of me that I'm trying to figure out my own relationship with, and that started back in 2018 when I moved to college for the first time, and I was meeting a lot more openly gay people, and I was like, oh, I can tell people that I'm gay, and it's nothing bad's gonna happen. Also, I'm like 9,000 miles from home, and my parents won't find out, and it was liberating and amazing. And so the character dealing with her identity has mirrored a lot of my life lately, and I think that's why it's so important to have representation on stage and off stage in all roles, because you need the writers to write authentically from what they know, and then you need the actors to pull from their lives authentically of what they know and then present that forward, whether it's, you know, a 10-minute play, a full form play, a short film online. We just need it everywhere, and we need diversity, and I hate that word diversity, but we just need more representation in all forms of entertainment. I don't know if I answered the question.
No, absolutely answered the question. But yeah. But yeah, anybody else want to hop in that question? It was, how did this show help
Well,
you
you know,
connect?
I've only been to India maybe 5 or 6 times in my life. I only met my grandparents 5 or 6 times in my life. I grew up when, you know, travel was very expensive. You know, if they called on the phone, it was like a huge, huge deal. That's just, again, aging me, but, you know, transcontinental phone calls were extremely rare. And so, I didn't really have a real relationship with my grandmother, but she still was powerful. Like, there were still waves of her power coming across the ocean. And my mother certainly, you know, felt, I think, intimidated by her mom. Luckily, we did have some relatives in the States, and luckily we had a lot of Indian friends, so I felt like I did get some exposure to that part of my mother's life, but not as much as I would have liked to, for sure. And then I didn't have contemporary friends, so I didn't have, you know, friendships like you guys had, so I wish I could have had that. But being in this play has been great for me because it's reconnected me with that part of my life, and it's let me explore my relationship with my mother and my grandmother, but it's also been working with these lovely women and, you know, hearing contemporary Indian music and you know, just hanging out with young women who are part of that culture. It's just been great for me and very fun for me. Getting to do an Indian accent is a dream come true. Even though the dialect coach was like, you're at a 4, and then you an 8. I was like, oh, Ashley, I thought I was better than that. But she did, she got us to 8, so it needs me to an 8 by teaching us all these important things to remember. And so yeah, it's just been, and you know, the set even reminds me a little bit of my grandmother's house. So there's definitely things that just evoked memories to my past, and it was just incredibly joyful to be part of this.
Preeti?
I wanted to say how this play helped me. I believe in a just world for all. I know it's wishful thinking, but it's plays like Jado Jehad, which provoke thought, conversation, this conversation that we are having, even action. It's plays like this that give us the strength to, you know, fight for acceptance. You have to stand up for yourself. It gives you the strength to do all of that. So keep at, I mean, it has taught me that I should keep at my Jado Jehad for making it to Broadway, and I want every one of you to keep at your Jado Jehad in whatever area of life that you want to fight for acceptance. And if we never give up, you know, one day there will be a just world for all. So that's what I wanted to say.
Wow. I think that like
I think we have audience question.
Oh yes.
We're allowed to ask questions?
Yes, of course.
Okay. I have a question. I guess it's maybe for the screenwriter, Fatima, but I guess anyone can answer it. But how much would you say the play changed from like your first initial draft to when you met the actors and actresses, or when you saw the first night? Like, how much did it change over the process?
Tremendously. I think the only thing that has stayed intact is scene 6, which is the biggest scene. I mean, it hasn't entirely stayed intact also. It's changed so much, but the essence of it has stayed the same.
Explain it for those who didn't see it.
Yes. The first iteration of the play was called America. It was based in America. It was the same 3 characters, but they were having completely different arguments, completely different, personal crises or intergenerational crisis. I think whatever was happening, it was completely different. Because the crux of it was that they were immigrants in the US, but then had to move back because visa issues, and then we're figuring out how to continue life beyond that. So much changed because for a while I tried making that work, in that they were in America at the start, but then came back to Pakistan and were able to resolve their issues in Pakistan. But then the more and more I thought about it, I realized I just did not need the America bit. It was just not the story that I wanted to tell, the story that I was invested in, or the angle that gave anything interesting to the actors, to the characters. What was interesting was just what was happening between them on their own, which probably came through best when they were at home and were able to contend with the things that they really needed to in the most intense form, like a divorced mother on her mother's couch. Is the intensity of it you will feel in Pakistan more so than you will ever feel in the US. In the US, she still has options, things to do. A closeted character or somebody who's not able to express to their family how they feel or how they have been perhaps let down even by their parents is far more interesting premise in Pakistan, where it's not just parents or family you're contending against, but also society and societal expectations and different facets of society that will remind you of your place in a multitude of ways. So then I just realized that the fact that I was trying to base it so hard in the US was very steeped in trying to prove a professor wrong, and that I had to just let go of that and write the play that I needed to. So I got rid of that entirely. And so every scene that has come together since has changed immensely, to give it more, to steep it better in the setting, to make their conflicts more heightened, or to continue the trajectory of the conflict over the course of the play. So much has changed. It's been a year and a half of just trying to get the right combination of things on paper.
I have a question. This is kind of a more specific question, but how did you decide to make Preeti's character the way that you made her? Because I feel like it was so unique, but it's also very relatable. I feel like my mom is a bit like that. She's a little bit funny and a little bit childlike, but I was just maybe my mom's just like that. Other Indian moms are strict and they are more tiger moms. But then I saw Preeti's character, I'm like, wait, are other South Asian moms like this? Or at home they're just they just want a hug and they just want to be vulnerable. And
I think there's so much truth to both sides of that, right? So much of the time our mothers are expected to be tiger moms, are expected, and not just when they are mothers, but when they are growing up, they have all of this responsibility on them to take care of others around them, or to make sure that their brothers are having fun, or that the men in the family get what they need. There's so much of being a young woman growing up in a South Asian family has so many expectations that draw so much from you, that sometimes either you become this person who can only be tiger mom, or who can only just exact certain standards on your children and your family, or you can just fall apart from that and just become who you thought you could be. I think part of Karima's shift is, and then the first few scenes that I've based in, that I did base in Brooklyn was when she was Tiger Mom, and she was actually in scene 2 as it stands. It's the grandmother who comes and wakes them up and is like, let's go, we need to get things moving. But in the play, when it was based in Brooklyn, it was the mother who was doing that, and then the grandmother came and then added another layer of intensity to the situation. But by the time she gets to Pakistan, even in that iteration of the play, she's broken. She's just like, she had all these dreams and ambitions for herself, and for so long she had to let go and let go and let go until she was just like, you know what, fuck this shit. I can be who I want to be. I can play Ludo, I can befriend whoever I want. I think the Ludo thing came through COVID. When in COVID everybody had so much time, and people, I don't know if this happened for you guys, but in Pakistan so many people started playing Ludo, online Ludo. And there was this thing in the news the other day, how this Pakistani woman found her soulmate on Ludo, who was Indian, then went to Nepal. They smuggled her from Nepal to India, and most recently the Indian government figured out that she was in India and living illegally and deported her back to Pakistan.
Wow.
And this happened right after the play ended, actually. So like I was not aware of any Ludo love stories before then.
Wow.
But because everybody was playing Ludo, and then things got bad between Pakistan and India, and my friend, like, it became impossible for people to get visas, and the only way you have to just cross the border is if you want to go to Kartarpur. And that is how Kartarpur came in, that is the only way. Like, Pakistanis can go to Kartarpur, but Indians need a specific religious visa to make the pilgrimage. And so because Prem, Karima's lover, knows Prem's brother is in the KSEC, so he's able to speed up the visa, and that is how Prem ends up in Pakistan for that very specific period of time to meet Karima. So there's this window of possibility that over the course of the writing process, all of these things have been happening, and they gave me different ideas, and I was just having a large period of time meant that I could just experiment with those things and see what the funniest angle was to give to Karima, and what that, I think, just technically speaking, character arcs are obviously super important. Where your character starts is completely different from where your character ends up, or what they're struggling with at the beginning, they're able to reconcile to a certain degree by the end. So keeping those technicalities in mind, just thinking about, I had known that I wanted Karima to give a lot of comic relief. I wanted to play with the trifecta a lot. In the scenes that were in Brooklyn, it was the grandmother, it was Karima who was mitigating, or who was managing the anger that was happening between the granddaughter and the grandmother. It was Karima who was in the middle trying to manage that. But then in the scenes in Pakistan, because Karima becomes somebody else, then Karima takes a step back, and then Manzoor has to be the one who has to mitigate that tension. So I enjoyed being able to play around with that and see who is taking up what responsibility, who is antagonizing who, and Karima's just who she became a very effective diffuser for the conversations that were happening between the grandmother and the granddaughter.
Thank you so much for that.
Okay, I guess moving more towards like the actual process of the production, what were some challenges, I guess, that you guys faced putting this production on?
I'm going to talk about the more obvious ones and not the more interesting acting ones. It's really hard to do South Asian things authentically when there are so many people on board who are not identifying as South Asian or not a minority themselves, because I think that there's a lot of understanding that comes in when you are a minority yourself or part of many minority groups. And so I found it particularly challenging. I loved the rehearsal process. It was really short and quick and challenging for other reasons, but I found, honestly, some of the tech week stuff very challenging. When this whole play was about what living life authentically means to me, and then having people who are on board who weren't as thoughtful and or well researched as Fatima is in their choices. And this ranged from something as silly as costume design to
Silly.
it was not silly. The costume designer put us in Amazon sourced kurtas, which were awful, and they were ugly, and they were inauthentic and often inaccurate, and I had to like literally be like, hey dude, I'm not gonna be able to wear that because you're basically putting me in the equivalent of just like wearing something inaccurately, and I'm not gonna represent a culture that's so similar to mine like this on stage badly. I don't want to do it. And I found that challenging. But then the other note, like I said, all the things that I've related to my character on, which were very difficult things, like internalized homophobia, like actual homophobia, being directed towards the character. When you're drawing from experiences that are so true to you, you have to disconnect a little bit, because if you put too much of it in, it's not healthy. So those are some of my challenges. I just have to. This is what I'm saying. We need representation in all parts of these productions, and it's so important. Otherwise, it's disrespectful.
I think representation, absolutely. I echo what Vidisha said, and then more than that, just a keenness or an earnestness that you bring to the table if you are doing something that you are not familiar with. I think so much. I think we had those obstacles where we had to deal with difficult people who like clearly were not of the culture but were very hell-bent on being right in that moment, despite us being like the costume designer, despite us being like, you know, this is not like, I had 4 conversations with him before Vidisha was like, I'm just not going to do this because this is tokenizing straight up. And it was when Vidisha used that word that he was like, yes, we will do whatever makes sense. But before that, 4 times I had to be like, this is not working, this is not working.
Yeah.
Before Susha and I just put together a costume and were like, just go on stage. And then she did, and everybody was like, look at that costume. And then we were like, yes, this is what works. So I think, but you know, there were people on the team who were not Pakistani or Indian, who were so earnest in the process. The lighting designer, the scenic designer, the sound designer. I had given very like specific feedback to about different elements that they had put together, and they were like, oh yes, you are right, because you know this better than I do. Therefore, I will adjust. I think just understanding that, you know, nobody is out to get you or, you know, is trying to make you do what you don't need to, but also just, you know, we're on the same team. We just want the best production. And as our director posted on Facebook recently, you know, you can't assume bad intent on anybody's part. If I'm giving you feedback, it is so that you do your job better, not because, you know, I don't like you or whatever. And then eventually we did his job for him, so that was great.
Jumping off of that, I used the word tokenized because some of the costumes were so blatantly bad and wrong, and I felt like to put me in very, very bad costumes just for the sake of being like, hey, look, she's wearing cultural wear, she's South Asian. I was like, you know what? I think my skin color will do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and you know, a more specific example of that is, you know, we have a party scene in it where I had to be like, you know, a lot of South Asian queer culture is influenced by Western queer culture. You know, we wear kurtas at home or at gatherings with our family, but none of us will go to a party wearing a kurta, you know. You wouldn't be caught dead doing that shit. And I had to explain that to him, and I had to be like, you know, this just does not make sense. You do not need to put her in a kurta in this scene. And he just kept ignoring me. So I think just, you know, which is why using the word tokenized was so important, because if you were going to put a kurta on a on a young millennial Gen Z person in a party scene. You are actually doing it simply for this, because she is South Asian, therefore she will wear this kurta, versus really understanding the context, or refusing to understand the concept in this particular scenario. But you know, we all learned a thing or two about putting our foot down.
It's a challenge, but we learn to find our voice and advocate
Oh,
for
absolutely.
ourselves and for representing this culture authentically.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it was such an intense but like necessary learning curve for me to like find myself in that moment and be like, I am going to tell you this because you know, in this moment I could explode. I could just be like, you are being difficult and stupid, and use those words, and therefore give him ammunition in the future to use, which like in this incredibly polarized American culture, me saying that to him would have, you know, meant that I am in hot water for a while for saying those things that were very true in that moment. But I had to be like, there is absolutely no reason for you to assume that an actor is going to be difficult without them giving you any reason to be difficult. Therefore, I would really appreciate that you take the notes that I've given you and come back tomorrow with the things that we need and do your job. And that was effective enough in that moment. I did not think that I would have a moment where I was able to very calmly say that instead of being angry. So just being able to do that for me was very necessary in that moment and very important growth.
It's a lot of emotional labor to constantly explain your culture to people who don't get it when all you're trying to do is put on a good and authentic play. You sign up for this, you don't realize you're signing on for the emotional labor of explaining your culture. But you know what? Do it and then get mad about it afterwards, because then it'll get done right.
Which is the important part, getting it done right.
Yeah, so we clearly need more Southeast Asian directors, producers, sound design, scenic designs. You know, we just need more folks to feel like they have a place in this career. And I want to encourage anyone that's interested to really come, because we need you. And a lot of energy was wasted trying to catch people up to what contemporary Pakistani culture is about. And it took energy from us as performers. And, you know, it would be nice if that didn't have to happen.
Absolutely.
That kind of like segues into one of my like last questions, which was, what is something that you guys learned and are gonna take on to any of your future productions, especially about like using your authentic voice and like integrating your culture wherever you can? Because as you mentioned, Jyoti, you were mentioning about how oftentimes it's like you're like trying to go for white roles, but even in situations like that, how can you still preserve like your authenticity and your sense of culture?
You know, it's very tricky as an actor. We have so little power. So one of the things, I'm sure Priti's run into this too, you walk a line of, you don't want to get a reputation in the business that you're difficult.
For sure.
So I, as an actor, have had to, you know, put up with such bullshit, and I've had to say, this isn't the moment to make a fuss, or this isn't the hill I'm going to die on. There will be hills where I do go to the back. And in this play, I had to have a conversation about, you know, the way that this play is structured is not linear, and it's a circular story, and we don't want to mess too much with that. We want to leave this play as much intact as possible. But it's very difficult as an actor, as an actress, I would say, even more than an actor, to have an opinion, because you will get a reputation that you're difficult and you will never get cast again. And it's not a joke, it's for sure. And so it's something I battle with, because I am outspoken and I really believe in speaking up and doing the right thing, but I also have to be realistic. If I want to work, I have to be very political and thoughtful about how I do things. And it's, you know, I loved, actually, she was very outspoken, and I loved her so much for her willingness to say, I'm not wearing this, and talking to people and advocating for herself, and the play is better for it. But we were in a fairly safe environment. But out in the world, you know, if you complain about your costume, it will get back to the director, it will get back to the producer, and you will not work again for that theater company. Because there's a hierarchy, and the costumer has his or her power, and they don't want to hear it from you. we were in a very privileged environment, and out in the real professional world, you don't get to do that. So it's a huge problem, and I don't know what to do except to maybe open my own theater company, which is maybe what we have to do. Is we just have to open our own place and change it, and not have a hierarchy, but have a communal way of putting on plays, and that everybody has power, everybody has a right to voice what they think is going on, and maybe that's the answer.
Yeah.
Because it's treacherous out there. And you know, I've seen actors make the mistake of speaking up and they don't work.
Anybody want to add anything to that? Right, that.
I wanted to say I agree with Jyoti 100%, and I would say whenever you go to any production, take the best, leave the rest.
Yeah, it's a great.
Boom.
You're very good at that.
She's very good at her
You're
phrases.
very good at that.
Yeah.
And I did want to thank Fatima to begin with for writing such a thought-provoking, conversation-provoking, and action-provoking play. And then I wanted to thank Bridget, who's not there with us today, that she directed us, and Fatima and Bridget, both of them, for considering me worthy of telling the story. And to my wonderful castmates, Jyoti, Vidisha, and Sushmita, who, for their love, it meant the world to me. And thank you, Kala, Sangha, thank you, and Gauri, and Sushmita, for having us today, and let us have this wonderful conversation.
Of course, no, thank you for coming. Thank you for talking to us about this, and especially being so vulnerable and what you've been saying, because I think it's important for anybody, like any South Asian person who, especially trying to like pursue any sort of creative arts, and honestly anything where there is not as much representation, we don't really see ourselves, but still like believing that our story is worth writing, acting, telling. Very important. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, woohoo, yay! Yay!
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.